Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 53 of the UTR Pro Tennis Tour podcast. My name is James Mackay. I'm the Director of Player and Collegiate Development at UTR Sports. As you know, the UTR Pro Tennis Tour is the go-to tour for rising tennis professionals across the world. Guaranteed matches, guaranteed prize money. Next on the show, I am bringing you arguably one of the best college tennis coaches of all time. 12 conference championships and a national championship. Matt Knoll, welcome on.
Thanks for having me, James.
Matt, 22 years at Baylor. We don't need to go over your record, 500 in this and 110 losses, multiple conference championships. Like I said, a national championship. What did you believe in? How did you do this at Baylor to become so successful and win so much at Baylor?
You know what, James? I think as much as anything, we believed in creating a brotherhood of guys that were really committed to getting better and to being excellent. And I think a brotherhood implies that they pour into each other. I think that really separated us. I think the other thing that mattered is, starting from the very beginning at Baylor, where we had nothing, we had no facilities, we had no team, we had no budget, we had no nothing. To have what I'll call a CEO mindset, to understand that there are a lot of ways to improve a program. And I think we had some great support with our leadership there, both the president, the athletic director, et cetera, where they allowed me the space to do a lot of things to help move the program forward beyond just coaching forehands and backhands.
So one of the things I preach on this podcast is I haven't given you a list of questions that I'm going to ask. These are genuinely real conversations. What would it take, and would you even consider ever going back into college tennis coaching?
Well, I like that. You put me right on the spot. Look, I think if I felt like I was in a place where they were really committed to pursuing a national championship, I'll be honest, I think it'd be pretty cool to be the first coach to win a national championship at two different schools. So I think if the right thing came down the pipe, I'd certainly want to hear about it.
Well, Matt was 2008 Baylor. He's a Baylor Hall of Fame. He won 13 Big 12 titles, and he won the 2004 national championship. What was the difference in those teams where you crossed the line and you actually won it? What happened in those teams that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I think that's the theme of this book that I wrote, right? This book, Rise, Roll, Repeat, right? I think there's three phases to leadership. Rise, where you're not relevant, to becoming relevant, which we did that at Baylor. Then becoming relevant, nationally relevant, and then crossing the finish line. And I did what I called the championship project, where I called coaches of all different sports that won multiple championships and asked them, how did they do it? How did they cross the line? And I shared that with the team. I said, look, these are changes we're going to make to try to go ahead and go to the next level. The team embraced it. It was a group effort. Everybody understood every step of the way. We were being more accountable, for a reason, and I think when you're doing a great job in a leadership role, it's not just the leader, talking about those things. It's the people in the group. When a guy's doing something that's not in line with your objectives and the team gets on him, right, before the coach can even talk, you've got something there. And that's how we were. We were like that probably starting in 2003 and for the next 15 years that I was at Baylor. Once we got the culture established, that was the expectation. We recruited to that. We were very clear in our recruiting. Look, if this isn't what you want, if you don't want to be part of this, then please don't come. We absolutely embraced individual success. And as you know, James, we had some guys that won the NCAAs and went on to have great success on the tour. But individual success flows into team success. They're not mutually exclusive. And I think a selfishness can really sabotage a college program. And we didn't have any of that. We had guys that were really committed to the team. And I think that then once you get to the level and you understand the concepts, then look, there's a little bit of luck involved. You can have the best team and still not win. Our best team was undefeated all the way until the NCAA finals, was up 3-0 in the match and didn't win. We lost, 4 3-setters. We didn't do anything wrong. We just, You don't win every day. So we felt like if we could be in position to win every year, which we basically were, that we'd get our share of championships. And we won a national indoor, and we won the team title outside, and had a lot of other, good runs at it.
Well, that's absolutely true. You definitely had a lot of success. Sorry to keep asking you about college tennis, Matt, before we move on to kind of what you're doing now. But now that you're away from it and you're looking on from the outside looking in to college tennis, what would be your advice? What would be your advice to leadership of the sport? What would be your advice to college coaches? What would be your advice to players or young assistant coaches? What would you say, if anything?
Well, look, aren't we all scared to death that programs are being dropped and there are less and less opportunities? That's something that we all talk about all the time, and the stats are out there. You don't have to guess about how many teams are being dropped, and it's chilling, frankly. And I think it's a lack of awareness, for lack of a way to put it. Tennis is a niche sport in our country, right? And we all wish it wasn't. We love it. It's important to us. But when you're in Waco, Texas, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, there aren't a ton of tennis fans in those communities, right? So if it's a niche sport, I think that we need to either respond to that by doing some things that allow people that aren't tennis fans to come into the game and enjoy being part of the atmosphere, or we need to get comfortable with having a very small number of college programs, right? I think it's one of the two. And I don't talk to anybody that says we think it's great to have less teams, but I wish I talked to more people that thought, I've talked about this a lot, and you and I have talked about some of the things we did at Baylor where the crowd could cheer. It just doesn't make sense to me that you can go to a basketball game and cheer your head off, go to a baseball game, cheer your head off, come across the sidewalk and have to be quiet. And in a community like ours in Waco, it didn't make sense to our fan base either, right? I think you've got to understand that college athletics is different than Wimbledon. I love Wimbledon. I go every year and I love it. But college athletics is college athletics. There aren't enough tennis fans in these college communities to support the sport. I hear people all the time talk about be on TV. But gosh, James, if I'm a TV executive, what's the value to me, right? I mean, if there's 50 people at the match between two top 10 teams, maybe it's really not that great to put on TV. How do I sell sponsorship to that? Who's watching it, right? And I think that I'm not hearing those practical arguments as much as I wish I did. And I think we as college tennis people have to get our own house in order, put 8,000 people at every match between two good teams. And now the value is pretty obvious to advertisers into TV. But I think we've got to start from there. And there must be other ways to do that. But I think certainly cheering is an obvious one. And we did it in a couple matches at Baylor. And we had a match against Oklahoma with both teams. I think we're top 3 in the country. And we had 2,000 people there, and they had a blast. Oklahoma had a big fan base come up, and they were cheering again when we were hitting second serves and having a blast. And, for a minute, it's a little weird as a player, right? But you get used to it pretty quick. As we've all said, the free throw shooters make their free throws just fine when people are waving their arms. And tennis guys are going to make their second serve just fine once they get used to it. So, yeah, I think that's an obvious example. But others, I think anything to be pragmatic about the reality of where tennis sits in our marketplace and make a decision. Do we want this to grow, or are we okay with it being a niche sport where maybe it's just in not that many places?
How good is that? I really hope people listen to that. Well, if you haven't seen that video, I've shared it before on social media, and the biggest thing I took from it was I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I'll share it and see what people think. The amount of people that actually care, that had an opinion about that match, about people yelling, like Dane Webb had a forehand right on top of the net, and people were going nuts right before he hit it, and he tried to absolutely leather it because he was so fired up because of the atmosphere. So the other thing that's being talked about is you have, the final site is in Orlando, and people were complaining one year or whatever, no one was there, and it's like, who's it on here? Is it on the USCA to get fans there? Is it on the governing body to get fans there? Or in my opinion, it should be on the head coach, right? To say, look, we are in the quarterfinals, and we would, you go into your community, wherever it is, and you get 3 buses to take fans down to come and cheer you on. You get I don't know, a donor's plane to take fans down there. I just believe it's on the coaching staff to unite a fan base, to go to wherever the final site is and create that atmosphere. Now, like you said, Matt, if they're bored and they have to be quiet, then maybe they don't want to go, right? But that was just my opinion. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that final site thing.
Well, I think we're in agreement that you help yourself in this world, right? You don't wait for somebody else to help you. The challenge, and this, frankly, James, is one of the reasons I'm having such a blast doing some of the consulting work I'm doing is, you work with coaches and they have really strong in certain areas. Maybe they're great recruiters or they're great at teaching the volley or whatever, but maybe they're not well developed in others. And I think what we're seeing in our sport, there aren't a lot of college tennis coaches that are well developed in the area that you're describing. I think you're an example of a guy that's been in the business that has a talent for that, right? And we can name a few others, but most don't. Most don't have a talent for that. So I think there's got to be a leadership put in place that will help, those that maybe don't have a talent for that. And also, again, a pragmatic attitude from coaches that maybe don't have that talent to be open to getting help. How can we do this better? Maybe the conference level, maybe maybe the ITA, maybe I don't know exactly the plan, but they've got to get some help because they just don't have the skill set. And we can keep saying get the skill set, but it's just not. They're not going to do it. You can't ask somebody to do something they can't do, but you can ask the coaches to be open to getting help. So maybe we can structure something that would allow them to draw big crowds. And I do. I live here in the Triangle. I go to matches at these schools that are top in the country. And there are 30 people at the matches when two teams are top 15 in the country, and it's not good.
Yeah, well, before we move on, big shout out to Matt's former assistant, Dominic Mueller, who just won another conference championship with Old Dominion. So congratulations to Dom and his squad. Matt, tell us what you're doing now. You are, I believe, running a placement company. You have written a book. You have your own website. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, James, I'm a teacher, like all of us that got into coaching, right? And teaching can take a lot of different forms. I think, one of the things I do is American College Placement, where we help kids find schools. And people ask, well, why do I need you? Well, okay, why do you need me? Well, there are very limited opportunities. If you're a junior in high school and you're a boy and you're a 13.5 UTR, maybe you don't need a placement service, right? But if you're not an elite player, or you're wanting to get into a selective college, and a lot of our clients are trying to get into selective colleges. I just had a call a minute ago with a boy that's visited, Amherst, Middlebury, Swarthmore, Claremont, and Tufts. Those are his visits. Those schools are only admitting 5% of the kids that apply, right? So every kid that applies has perfect grades. Every kid that applies has AP classes. All the kids being recruited are 11 UTRs. They're pretty good players. Why you? Why in the world would how do you stand out? Well, you can send emails that go into the coach's spam folder and you're just a nobody. Or you can have Matt Knoll call the coach on the phone and create a narrative for why you're special. Why is this guy a guy you need to have on your team, right? And we've had tremendous success helping kids get into the elite schools because, again, we're able to understand the language that the coaches speak. And we pre-screen the kids. So, the coaches ask me, are the parents crazy? Right? I mean, and if the parents are crazy, we don't work with them. We drop parents all the time because they're not realistic. My kid's a 9 UTR and he wants to play at UCLA. Well, I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. My kid's got a 2.0 GPA and he wants to go to Princeton. Well, I'm sorry, I can't help you, right? So we make sure that we help them go through the process. And part of our value is being honest, telling them what they can't do. Look, of course, I know the coach at Pepperdine, but I've called him and he's not going to give you a slot. So please don't fly out there and visit him. Use your resources to do something else. And people are excited and they'll show up. If you don't help them, let's put our resources into places where you can actually, have an opportunity and not waste a lot of time and money. You have limited time and money. Same thing with coaches, right? I'm teaching. What are you strong at? What are the things that you can do better? Same thing with athletic directors. There's so much change, right? There's so much going on right now. And it's so hard, particularly for the people that are at the top of the game, whether it's coaching or in athletic administration. It used to be, I've worked my whole career to be the AD at North Carolina, right? And a basketball recruit comes in and they walk in the gym and they go, wow, Jordan played here and all these other incredible players, and you recruit them and they come. That's not how it works anymore. Now it works, how much are you going to pay me? And if you're going to pay me $2 million and the school down the road is going to pay me 1.3, I'm going to go to the school that's going to pay me 1.3. And that's not easy to take when you've worked your whole career to become the AD at North Carolina, for example, which is an elite brand and a fantastic place to go to school. Things have changed. The ground has shifted. How do you manage the change? How do you manage it when your whole roster is gone? Basketball teams, they get to the end of the season, they have nobody on the team. Okay, so now you got to get a whole new bunch of guys in. How do you manage the culture of having a whole new group of guys when you have no time? The season is right now. Okay, so that's a whole different skill set than the skill set that you've been working on your whole career. All your mentors taught you to do it a certain way. Now the rules have changed, right? And if you're going to be successful, you better change with them. Okay, well, how do I learn how to do that? And I think the thing for me, James, I've been the coach of a team where we had no resources at Northern Iowa, and we slept 6 guys in a room, right? And we ate at McDonald's, right? I've been in the coach of a team where we lost in the finals after being undefeated and having the best team, right? I've been the coach of a team where we practiced, on 8 slanted courts with no bathroom and no locker room, and you had to run over between drills and get into the woods to go to the restroom and hustle back out there to get ready to play, right? And I've had a great boss. I had great bosses that were amazing and supportive. I've had terrible bosses that were not supportive and not amazing, right? So again, all these experiences, I've raised money, a tremendous amount of money. We raised $22 million at Baylor to build facilities. So I know how to do that, right? Not a lot of coaches have that skill set. We've recruited internationally. We've recruited domestically. We've done a lot of different things, I think, that can lean into what executives are dealing with, what coaches are dealing with, and certainly what families are dealing with as I go through this process. And the thing that I can't emphasize enough, and I say this all the time, James, to the people I work with, this is supposed to be fun.
Right.
Right? You're a coach. This is amazing. This should be a blast. You're a great recruit. Even if you're a girl and you're a 7 UTR, I'm going to get you 12 offers. The phone's going to be ringing like your Coco Gauff. People are going to want you on the team. You're going to go there. They're going to roll out the red carpet. They're going to make you feel like an absolute superstar. And when you win the conference and there's a dog pile, it feels exactly the same. It doesn't matter if it's at Tennessee or Baylor or a school, D3 school that no one's ever heard of. It's all your teammates jumping on you. It feels the same, right? And when you're a coach, it's the same. You should be enjoying the mentorship. Again, we all got into it because we want to teach, we want to mentor, we want to grow young people. We certainly want to compete. You can do all those things, and we can help you expand your skill set so that you can have a blast doing what should be the greatest job in the world. And you've done it. And when people ask me about, do I miss it? I miss the good parts, right? Right? The good parts are unreal, right? But unfortunately, some people are struggling with, and change is hard. And there's change across the organization, again, from the donors to the AD, to the coaches, to the players. You've got to really be good at managing the new reality.
Right. Here's a question for you, Matt. So things have changed in college athletics. Things have changed in college tennis, right? You won championships. Now and you've seen what's going on now. Some coaches are saying you can't win without paying players, right? You can't do this without that. And that might be correct, right? If this was a hypothetical for you, right? And you were given free reins to go out there and build a roster to win a national championship, how would you do it? How would you do this? Scholarships, NIL, think as creatively as you can. Would you pay every single player X amount of dollars? Would you not? Tell us what you would do.
Well, look, I think the most important thing is you have to enter every relationship as a relationship, right? And I think that's something I know I lost track of for a while. When we had no facility, no tradition, nothing to recruit with but me. I did a really good job building the relationship with the prospects and with the recruits. And then when they came in, did a great job of pouring into them and making sure that we had a tight group and we had a really strong culture. Well, then we got the best facility in the country, right? And we're hosting a Challenger and we're hosting Futures, and we've got all the resources in the world. Now, all of a sudden, without even thinking about it, kids come on visits and I'm showing the facility. right? I'm talking about a wild card to a challenger. I'm talking about all this other stuff. And I lost track a little bit of the relationship. I think about Cameron Norrie visited Baylor. And I did a terrible job on the visit, because again, I'm talking about, I knew he wanted to be a pro, and we were talking about all these things, and I did a terrible job of building a personal relationship with he and his family, right? And so I think that's the most important thing, right? Of course, you have to have talent, but you see this all the time in college sports, of all the sports. Get all these guys on the big money, they don't gel, it doesn't work out, it blows up in your face, and you have the worst experience ever, right? And we're seeing that some in college sport, in college tennis even. There's some rosters out there that have been built with NIL, and guess what? They're not going to perform under pressure. They're not going to come through for each other when the pressure's on. So I think that's job one. Have a great culture, right? And then you look out in the marketplace, right? If you got to pay X to get a guy that's 500 ATP and he's being recruited by the other top 5 schools in the country, okay, that's the market. You can't fight that. That's the market, okay? The market's decided, right? And so you go down the line, right? And hopefully you'd have the support of your athletic department to recognize, I didn't set the market. This is the market, right? And so we've got to respond. I'm not going to go out there and buy players. If the market says he's supposed to get X, I'm not going to try to give him twice as much. That's not the guy I want, right? And if on the first phone call, the guy says, I'm picking the place with the most money, my next thing would be, let me help you with that, right? I understand where you're coming from, right? We all want to make money, but let's start over, right? Let's talk about, you want to play maybe for somebody that's going to invest in you the most and care about the most for you as a person. And then we'll talk about the money, and we want to treat you fairly, right? We're going to treat you fairly given the market. So that's the way I would approach it. And I think that's something that, as things move fast, it's easy to lose sight of that. And it's easy to get cynical, right? It's easy to think, well, everybody's taking advantage of everybody, and not necessarily, right? I think there are good people out there that just want to be treated fairly, but still want to invest in each other and want to take advantage of what an amazing opportunity this is to be on a great college team.
Great advice there. I hope coaches listen to that. Let's talk about your book, Rise, Rule, Repeat. It's behind you there. Why did you do it? How long did it take you to write? And what would you say to people considering reading it?
Well, it started, we won the championship at Baylor, and no team had ever won a championship at Baylor in a team sport. So the Baylor Publishing came to me and wanted me to do a book, a handsome cover.
There it is.
I worked with an author over the summer, and we did a lot of interviews, but then it just didn't take off. I got busy and moved on. And so I had some notes, but it didn't go anywhere. So I've always had the idea I wanted to do it. Well, then when I started working with coaches and leaders, I started seeing a lot of the same themes, where, again, they'd be really strong in a certain area. They'd come to a program or into a business that was not doing well. They'd build it up to a certain level, but then they'd get stuck. They wouldn't make the adjustments to go to the next stage. And so I kept running into this over and over. And I was finding, as I was advising people and trying to help them, it was really hard for them to move out of what they were good at. Again, maybe you've developed this culture of toughness, and you're outworking everybody and you're doing those things, but eventually maybe you need to take a step back and trust the guys a little bit more. And a lot of it too, James, was from my own experience. I was the jackass in the room that ruined a team in 2000. We made the quarters in 99. We had the bulk of our team back. We really felt like we were going to make a great run. The guys were amazing. And we played our first match of the season on the road against a top 5 team indoors. And remember, at the time, we didn't even have indoor courts at Baylor, so we never practiced indoors. And we lost a close match. The team was in the locker room at their facility, and jackass head coach Matt Knoll comes in and starts screaming and yelling and acting like an idiot, right? Challenging them and questioning their effort and whatever. And I lost them that day. It was in January. They were done with me. And by the end of the year, I was done with them. And we're at the final side. And, I'm like, yeah, go eat. I don't want to see. I go to the movies by myself. I remember this. I'm in Athens. I went to the movies I hated them. They hated me. And I absolutely, it was 100% my fault. And instead of having a chance to win a championship, we underachieved, right? We won the Big 12 and we made the final side, but we didn't do the things that we were capable of. And look, I had to be reflective. Now, look, those guys built the program. They're seniors and juniors. They didn't need me. They needed me to pat them on the back and say, hey, let's get them next day, right? Keep working. And I did a terrible job. And so I evolved. And then the next time we had a good team, I trusted them more, and I allowed them to to grow. And I just made a lot of changes with the way I managed the guys. And guess what? They played way better, right? We had incredible experiences, had really close teams. So that's just one example. But I have a whole, experiences from my own career, experiences working with other teams, seeing what other people are doing, and trying to help. And again, back to I'm a teacher. So going from not being relevant to relevant, so that's rise. Going from being relevant to winning, rule, and then going from winning to winning consistently, repeat. So you talk to a guy like Dick Gould, who is in my book. Dick won 17 national championships, right? And when I was coming up, everybody always said, well, that's because he's at Stanford. Of course they're winning championships. Well, Dick retired in 2004, right? Stanford hadn't been in a final since, right? So he's a genius. He should be up there with Belichick or Wooden or anybody that we can name that's won it's 17 titles. And when you meet Dick and talk to Dick, you see why. I mean, it's not an accident. The guy's 89 years old. He's an elite communicator, an incredible guy, incredibly generous. And again, a giver, right? A teacher. And sure, he had some strategies for building the team and all those things that are amazing. But I learned from him, right? I'm humble enough to understand, look, he can teach me something. And it's been really fun for me, James, as I get on this journey of helping others. It's funny. It's the most elite, accomplished people that are open to being helped. They're secure about who they are. They understand that getting 1% better can really make a difference. And those have been the people I've worked with the most, people that are at the very top. So when I started working with college coaches, I thought I might work with a lot of coaches that hadn't had great mentors. Maybe were mid-major coaches. But you know what? Boom, it was right to the top. I'm working with coaches that have all been in the round of 16 or the semis, and they're like, what do I need to do to get to a championship? How can I take the next step? And that intellectual curiosity, I think, with either athletic directors or sales teams or coaches or athletes and parents really gets me excited, right? I mean, those are the people that I'm excited about, because those are the people I feel like I can really make an impact, just like the people that you work with as a coach, right? Get a guy in here who's got some talent, but also is intellectually curious, is open. I talk about that in the book with Johan Justa, who changed his backhand from a one-hander to a two-hander in his very first practice. The guy was an All-American for us. He was number one in his country. John Pierce, who came to me as a transfer from another school. When I said, hey, John, you should do this, he said, okay, coach. And he did it. And you know what? If it didn't work the first time, he didn't look at me and go, well, that's bad advice. That's not going to work. He took responsibility for himself and did it better, right? And we were able to add so many pieces to his game. Now, to be fair, his doubles was in place. I didn't do anything for his doubles. But to take him from being to being a 100 in the country type college singles player to being a guy that, was an All-American in singles, right? Which is a significant jump in a year. But it's all about, he was intellectually curious. He was motivated. He had some talent. He listened. And to see him improve, man, how rewarding is that? That was really amazing. And we were able to attract to our team guys like that. And also I'm able to attract people that I'm consulting with and working with like that. And look, anybody that's listening to this, if that's who you are, if you want to partner with us, man, I'd be thrilled to do it, because it's a blast. It's just, you feel like you're stealing because you're getting their good ideas while they're getting your good ideas, and everybody grows together.
The big thing that you said there, and I hope coaches again listen, is it's okay to look in the mirror and critique, and it's okay to self-reflect. I think the biggest advice that I have is just remember throughout the chaos of coaching to always be you, be yourself, however that is. If you're trying to be someone you're not, good chances are you're probably not going to be very happy, right? And I think you just nailed it on the head. You explained a situation in 2000 where you admit fault. Whoever was on that team, I don't know who was on that team, but I'm pretty sure I can guess some heavy hitters that were on it. But you admitted fault, right? And I think coaches don't forget to do that. You're not going to be perfect all the time. It's a stressful job that you're in, but like Matt is saying, remember to have fun, because it's meant to be fun. So look, Matt, really appreciate that. Last thing for you is really, this is a podcast with UTR. I do work for UTR. I'm just curious, how do you use UTR in your role now? Are you communicating with your kids? Are you giving them a UTR range? Are you advising them to play the pro tennis tour? Are you looking at UTR rosters online? What are you doing with UTR specifically?
Well, it's another example of how dumb I am, James. I was in a coaches meeting and Dave Fish stood up and said, "Hey, we're going to do this rating system, and it's going to be UTR, and it's going to be better than what they do in France, and it's going to be." And I'm like rolling my eyes, like, "Yeah, come on, man, sit down." I mean, what are you talking about? I was like, "There's no chance," right? So, flash forward and look, Mark Leslie's a genius, right? You've got an incredible leader. He's brought resources to bear and work ethic and innovation and man, the way that he's been able to, again, change. The ground has shifted for this company, and man, he has shifted right with it. And the things that you're doing are a result of that, right? This incredible tour that you guys are doing and all the things you're doing, just amazing. So back to answering your question, look, UTR is the currency of college tennis recruiting. I mean, just flat out. That's what we talk about. We study the lineups. We know what all the coaches are looking for. We use that to help our kids, create an initial list of schools. They're within their range. And look, I've placed some football players and I've placed some basketball players. And I got to tell you, it's really hard to compare a linebacker from a high school in Houston that was all district to a linebacker from Kansas that was all district and all state. How in the world can you tell who's better and who has more potential? Well, the algorithm at UTR, say what you want, it's really, really good. I mean, it's really, really accurate. And you can tell. I mean, it just tells the truth. And people say all the time, I'm better than my UTR. Well, maybe, but you get a chance to prove it every time you play, right? And it's really, really good. And I think it's made an incredible impact on the whole ecosystem of tennis in our country. So thanks to you and your team.
Appreciate you saying that, Matt. Currency of college tennis recruiting. I wrote that down. I've never heard that before, but I think you're right. Anyway, Matt, really appreciate your time. Best of luck. If you have not read the book, Rise, Rule, Repeat by Matt Knoll, definitely go out there. I have mine right in front of me. And all the best with your new adventure, Matt. We wish you the best from everyone at UTR. And lastly, thank you again.
Thanks, James. Great to be here.
See you.